Hello, my name is Matt Wilhelm. I'm going to be tying a March Brown emerger, and we're tying at the Federation of Fly Fishers tonight. March Browns on the Yellowstone River, there's eastern March Browns, western March Browns. The March Browns out here where we live will start hatching. A lot of it depends on Mother Nature. Sometimes they'll hatch in March, late March. Sometimes they won't happen till early to mid-April. It depends on water temperature and stream flows and all sorts of different things. So basically, there's a lot of different variables, but in some research that I did about March Browns and trying to learn how to tie flies to match them, this pattern seems to do really well. And I'll tell you why as I go through this fly. Just a few things about materials here. We're using a Dairiki 125, size 12. These are their emerger hooks. Pretty neat hook. They're a thin wire, so they're good for floating flies or flies that are right in the film. And we're using a 12 on this one. You can also use a 14, 12 or 14. I tend to go with the 12s, but you can also tie them in 14s. We're also going to be using a little bit of wire. I'm using silver wire for this one. You can also use copper, you can use red, you can use all different colors of wire. So we're going to use wire for the rib. The tail is going to be pheasant for the tail, and turkey for the body. We're going to use a little bit of dubbing, and I'm just using some natural hare's ear dubbing with a little bit of antron in it added. So using this for a little bit of dubbing, and then the hackle, the soft hackle, is going to be Hungarian partridge. All right, so those are the materials that we're going to use for this. Brown thread, and I think this is, you can use a 6/0 or 8/0 thread for this, whichever you'd like. All right, so I just put a thread base on, and put on some pheasant for the tail. I'm just going to use maybe about 5 or 6 fibers for the tail. The reason that I like fishing a soft hackle pattern for the emerger on the March Brown is that the research that I did and reading and talking with people is that March Browns tend to, when they emerge, they tend to head toward calmer, not so turbulent water. So little areas behind rocks and insides of riffle corners, places like that where they're not out in the heavy current, they tend to come out. They like to get to that softer water to emerge. And March Browns shed their exoskeleton as they emerge. So a lot of mayflies, a lot of caddisflies will shed their exoskeleton at the water's surface. These shed their exoskeleton as they rise, as they emerge through the water column. So that's why a soft hackle imitation works really well for this fly. So I just tied the tails in, and I'm tying in a piece of silver wire. You can also use copper, you can use all different colors, but I'm using silver today. Take that thread back down to where we tied in the tails. The body's going to be turkey, and I'm going to use probably about, I don't know, maybe about, for this size of hook and for the body, I've got about five pieces there that I'm going to cut off in one chunk. I'm going to tie these in by the tip. The tips are more supple than the stems. The stems are a little bit stiffer. The tips are a little bit easier to work with. So I'm going to tie these in by the tip, right down here at the bend of the hook. Tie it in with a nice soft wrap, and I'm going to move the thread forward, to about 2 eye widths behind the eye of the hook, and I'm going to wrap this around the hook. This will be the body. So it's kind of like a pheasant tail nymph right here. Only I'm using turkey. You can also use pheasant for this as well. I just like the turkey. Whatever you want to do, you can use pheasant for the body if you want to. You could also use a dub body, some type of a brown with a brown dubbing. Be careful when you tie off pheasant and turkey. If you put too much pressure on the thread, sometimes you'll cut your material. There we go. So tie that off. And now we're going to use this wire for a rib and help strengthen the fly. A lot of times in the spring on the Yellowstone, Madison, Gallatin, the March browns will sometimes happen at the same time as the Mother's Day caddis. What I've found is that they don't hatch in the numbers, the multitudes that the caddis do. And sometimes during a Mother's Day caddis hatch, if you happen to see a couple of March browns in the air, use the March brown because it's a bigger fly. There's not as many to choose from. So a lot of times the fish will tend to go for this fly a lot, either in the emerger form or the adult form. This is that hare's ear dubbing that I had out before. And we're going to put a little bit of a thorax on this with this hare's ear dubbing. It's got a little bit of antron in it for sparkle, makes it kind of appealing to the fish maybe, or the fly tire, or both. I like it. Just a little bit. So we're going to put a little thorax on here. You can fish this as a dropper. You can fish it by itself. I like to fish it as a dropper. That's one of my favorite ways to fish it. Behind either an adult March brown, maybe a parachute style, or possibly, or maybe even a caddis fly if there's caddises on the water, or you can fish it by itself. But it makes a really, really good dropper fly. Hungarian partridge, let's see here. That looks like a good one. What I like to do when I prepare, whoops, got two of them. When I prepare Hungarian partridge is I take my hackle pliers and where'd they go? There they are. And to prepare this feather, I've got really big fingers, and so what I like to do is take the hackle pliers and put it on the vein, right out on the very tip. Just like that. Just like that. And then I'll pull down against the grain real soft, not to break the feather, but this really helps me to isolate the very tip of the feather. And there's the tip of the feather right there. So I'm going to tie that in. I'm going to give the bobbin a counterclockwise spin. Sometimes when I tie, I'm a right-hander, my thread wants to jump toward the eye of the hook. If you're a right-handed fly tyer, if you spin the bobbin counterclockwise, the thread will tend to jump back toward your hand that you're attaching, your left hand. If you're a left-handed fly tyer, you'd want to spin it the other way. It's just a really neat little trick to capturing delicate little fine materials. Wayne Llewellyn, I learned that from him. He has a really good class that he teaches just on thread, on handling thread, manipulating thread, and it's really neat little tricks to make fly tying a lot easier when you're using really smaller hooks and smaller materials, and you have big fingers like I have. I'm going to clip that hackle plier, rotating hackle plier onto the grouse feather. And we're going to try to get 2 wraps out of this. Some people will tie them a little bit sparser. I like mine with a little bit more hackle on them. So I'm going to go, there's 1 time, I'm going around 2 times with this. Because what we're trying to imitate here, we don't want to use the fuzz, but what we're trying to imitate is that the soft hackle is imitating the exoskeleton that's sloughing off of the fly as it's coming to the water surface. So I put 2 full turns on there. Okay, I'm going to brush all these back now. Get them, put a few more wraps around the eye. And normally I would do a whip finish here, but I forgot my whip finish tool. So we're just going to do some half hitch knots, which work just fine when you put a little bit of glue on them. And there it is, March brown emerger. Fishes real well during the March brown hatch. Fish it in the softer water, riffle corners on the inside of the calm part of the riffle, on the seam, behind little pieces of riprap that come out with the soft water behind that. That tends to be where these work the best. Fish them as a dropper, fish them by themselves, but it's a great little pattern, tied in size 14 or a size 12 for March brown hatch.